Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators football podcast. As you may have noticed there, we had a little new intro for the new year this year. We're going to go with a recording we had there from the Kentucky game that we were actually, I believe, both in attendance for. But regardless, recorded that, and so wanted to change the opening up a little bit, mix it up, get something a little more on theme, if you will. And so we're gonna give that a try, see how it goes. But to that end, I am Ben, one of your hosts, as always, joined by your other host, Mr. Randy. Randy, how are we feeling tonight? How's chilly Gainesville treating you?
B, what's up, my man? Happy New Year. Happy to be recording with you. It's cold, not gonna lie. Moved to Florida because I thought it'd be warm, and it typically is, but right now it's cold. Um, but outside of that, man, just looking forward to new year, new topic, a lot of excitement, and can't wait to get started, my man.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So happy New Year to you as well. And just so we're starting things off on the right foot here, for those who may not have listened to the end of the show last week or listened to the show last week at all, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, we are going to do a shorter pod here, and that's something we're going to try and do. Probably a few times this offseason, probably more than a few, really, in that, some of these topics we're just not going to have quite as much content, but that's okay. We're going to probably produce something in the neighborhood of about half of what our normal pod is what we're thinking. We'll see. We'll find out tonight if that's what actually happens or not, right? But our goal is to make some shorter, kind of in between, the episode timing. If you remember last year, we were going like every 3, sometimes even every 4 weeks in the off season, after we got through, some of the stuff after the end of the season there. And so the goal this year is to do every 2 weeks and just do some shorter pods. So just so everybody knows what we're trying to do here. So to that end, you'll find our agenda tonight is a lot shorter than it normally is, but we still have some pretty good content, I think, to get through. So with that, our intro, as always, will be our mission, our accuracy disclaimer, our vision, and our agenda. Our mission is, of course, to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our accuracy disclaimer is that our information will be accurate to the best of our possible ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data comes from either ESPN or stats.ncaa.org, and recruiting data comes from on3.com unless otherwise cited. Our vision, of course, is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, as well as on-the-field execution. I got to figure out how to memorize that whole thing so I don't have to read my notes to do it, right? That'd be nice. At any rate, our agenda for tonight is going to be a statistical analysis. And I didn't actually say the topic of the pod. Let me back up. So our topic for the pod is offensive productivity review. And offensive is in quotes there because many times it was offensive, how our offensive production went, right? And so then from that, what is the analytical case for hiring an OC? That's really what we want to look at here. Just straight up numbers. Not an opinion in the numbers. We are then going to discuss the numbers and where we think that is building the case. But the numbers themselves should bear out, I think, very interestingly when we take a look at them. So to that end, our topics for tonight, or our agenda topics, are a statistical analysis of the past 3 years in a few different categories that we'll get to, and then a discussion around those stats. And that's it. From there, it'll be a wrap up. And we will talk about our next pod and what we're going to go over and go from there. And that's really all we're going to cover. So the goal is, by keeping it short, that we will keep it short, but we'll see. Because as we've been known to do, we can talk a little bit. So to that end, let's get things started. Why don't you start us off with some of the stats we've got here for points per game and yards per game there, Randy?
Yeah, I was going to say talk a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
So as B alluded to, the offensive productivity review, offensive in quotation marks, because sometimes, Gator Nation, it seemed like the offense that was produced on the field is not what we either anticipated or was looking forward to see it. So some people can say that the offense is not what it should be. Some people can, and that's a fair statement. Some people can say the offense should look much differently, especially with the one known as DJ Langway under center. The other thing that people can say is we need a signal caller. So again, these are all valid opinions, But as Ben mentioned, where is it in the analysis? Can we prove the case via analysis, via quantitative evidence, that we can make a case why an offensive coordinator is more than necessary? So we look at productivity.
Spoiler alert. Yes, we can.
Yeah, pretty much. So as being mentioned, we've got some stats coming to you tonight. We're doing it from ncaaStat.com, and I'm going to start on the points per game breakdown. And again, this is under the Napier era, right? So we're looking at 2022, 23, and 2024. For those of you who don't remember, Coach Billy Napier did come to get, he touched down, I want to say December 5th, 2021. His staff got right to work. But hey, he's been in Gainesville now a solid 3 years and a month. So, hey, time flies when you're having to watch football games. So here we go.
Yes, indeed.
Points,
yes, indeed.
Yeah, right. Points per game in 2022, 29.5 points per game. Now, mind you, in 2022, we had AR-15 at the helm, Mr. Anthony Richardson, now with the Colts, at the helm there at quarterback. Big win to start the year, big upset win against Utah at home. Phenomenal. We thought that was going to set the pace for a lot of great things to come. And obviously, we know it's been a bumpy ride. There's been a lot of turbulence on that trip, folks. In 2023, we saw our points per game go down to 28.4. We know 23 was not the campaign that we were hoping for. Obviously, when we look at what happened in the recruiting fields, what happened with the recruiting class and the transfer portal. And as you all know, that was Mr. Graham Mertz's first year as our signal caller. Graham did a lot of great things for this program. Still believe he was the right quarterback at this time for what this program needed. But at the same time, we just could not push the ball down the field and create the type of provocative offense to get Gator Nation going. There's a reference.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Right. In 2024, of course, Graham started the season. Mr. Lagway was intermingled there a time or 2 or 10. But as we know, we lost Graham Cracker after midway through the Tennessee game with the torn ACL. And of course, Mr. Lagway finished off the year and did very well. Obviously, we ended on a great winning streak there to end the season. But keep this in mind, in the games that Mr. Lagway started and finished was undefeated. The only game that he started but did not finish, he lost, of course, was Georgia. To that end, 2024 campaign, 28.3 points per game. So I'm not going to go through that real quick. 2022, 29.5 points per game. 2023, 28.4 points per game. 2024, 28.3 points per game. Okay, didn't exactly get better.
No, we did not. And a quick call out there on 24. I will give a little break to the team in 24. Scoring nationally was significantly lower in 2024 across the board than it had been the prior 2 seasons, and I think that's because of the clock changes that you saw. Even though we had the 2-minute warning, we had the running clock, on plays out of bounds throughout the game, which was not necessarily the case before. And you had the, of course, you saw the first down stoppages, but they were, I feel like a little quicker. And at the end of the day, whatever the cause, whether it be the clock and now it was running, which I think is probably the primary, but regardless, points per game were down across the board. So I will give a little forgiveness to that number being lower. However, there are other points to be made here. So I'll let you continue. Sorry.
Copy. No, and that's a fair point. I think what people did not realize this year is what that would do to the game overall, because obviously the NCAA is trying to mirror a little bit more of the NFL, introducing the 2-minute warning, so on and so forth. So based off of that, obviously it affected time of possession, it affected scoring, it affected a couple other factors. We didn't realize how it would ultimately pan out for the season, not just for Florida, for a lot of teams. Hence why we mentioned scoring is down across the nation. But That is what it is. All right. So there's your points per game breakdown. Scoring less with arguably a little bit more talent. B, I'm not going to steal that spotlight from you. We'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Exactly. Yards per game. So let's go over yards per game, right? Because when you look at a productive offense does what? It moves the ball, whether it's chunk yardage, whether it's, death by 1,000 cuts, right? 1,000 passes, dinking, doinking. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But at the end of the day, yards per game typically means that the offense is on the field a good amount of time. It is getting good yardage plays. It's also helping the defense to rest a little bit and also get some momentum, because of obviously a team that is humming along in the best of ways, clicking on all 8 cylinders. We've heard Billy refer to it before as playing complementary football, and that's what we want to do ultimately. So let's go into yards per game. 2022, 424.1. Respectable, very respectable.
Yes, not half bad.
Not at all. 2023. Now, again, 2022 AR. Okay. 2023, 409.1 yards per game. Slight drop off. Okay. We realized that in 2023, again, Graham did a lot of great things, great human being, great kid. But one of the things that we did not do good enough was get the ball down the field and get good chunk plays as a result. Now, let's go to 2024. Obviously, with the switch up from Mertz to Lagway, we saw a lot more down the field, hence why we had Badger and DK put up the numbers they did. Badger, a couple hundred yards away from 1,000-yard receiving season, his first year in at Florida. But 2024, 386.9 yards per game. So again, 2022, 424.1, 2023, 409.1, 2024, 386.9. Significant drop off there.
Significant drop off, exactly. And so the point that I would make there is, once again, if points per game are down across the league, yards per game are probably down across the league, and they are. Though not quite as extensively. It's not quite the same correlation that it is to points per game. However, what I would make the argument of is, if it were just natural attrition on that number, like it might be on the previous number, right? Because it was only 0.1 points per game lower that we were year over year.
Yes.
This is 23 yards. Well, 22.2 if you want to get technical, but nonetheless, that's more of a drop off than we had from 22 to 23. So that's not just your average, being affected by the clock, right, and the lack of possessions and the lack of plays run and all those things. This goes way deeper than that. So that's all I want to say there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a fair point, because when you look at the production, right, in 22 to 23, you look at the difference, right, of 424.1 to 409, right, and you got a difference of 15 yards. Okay. So that is what it is. But now you're going to get into a difference of closer to 22. What? Wait is it? 22.2 yards.
Yep.
That is extremely significant. And here's the other thing too that we saw as a result of it, right? In 2023, you had a lot of in what we refer to as the dink and the doink, the slow methodical drives. We had a lot of drives last year that resulted in a 9-play, 10-play, 11-play, 12-play drive. As a result of that, that's also why the offensive time of possession was a top 10 in the nation, right?
Yeah.
At almost holding the ball 32 minutes a game. So that was great. But when you look at what happened this year, look at our chunk yardage plays. Look at our explosive plays this year, right? That trumped our explosive plays from 23. Big difference, right? So we moved the ball down the field, got more chunk yardage, more explosive plays, shorter field to work with. In addition to that, our time of possession tailed off tremendously. We're down around 26, 27 minutes a game, time of possession. Big difference there. So what are the points?
If that had resulted in significantly more offense, it wouldn't have been a bad thing. However, because it didn't, there's concern, right? So to that end, let's look a little deeper into what these yards per game numbers were made up of, right? So we're going to look at passing yards per play and rushing yards per play. So we're going to break this down a little further. So first things first, passing yards per play. 2022, 14.62 yards per completion. So I shouldn't say yards per play. It was yards per completion that we're actually going to look at here, right? Because yards per attempt is different, right? That would truly be yards per play on this. But we're going to look at your actual yards per completion, and it is 14.62 in 2022. 11.03 in 2023, as you might expect, significant drop off, right? Changing from AR to Graham, and you see that drop off in those numbers as a result. 2024, it does actually go back up to 14.11. Why? DJ Lagway. That's why, right? However, despite DJ's amazing ability, and for those that don't know, PFF, Pro Football Focus, has him rated as the best deep passer in Division I football for last season. As a freshman, are you kidding me? That's phenomenal. However, that's why you see this number going back up. It's solely because of DJ, right? We saw what Mertz did or couldn't do or did well, depending on how you want to look at, how you want to frame it, how you want to focus it, right? He was better with the short to intermediate passing game. He was not good with the deep ball. Conversely, DJ is much better with the deep ball, right, than he was with the shorter intermediate passing, at least to start. That started to show a little improvement as the year went along. But overall, clearly it's the deep ball where he shines, right? So it makes sense that this number goes back up with him playing half the season, basically. So that's the long and the short, or starting half the season, I should say. He played more than half the season, but started half the season. So when you look at this, that is a clear explanation for why these numbers were higher this year. However, the thing I want to point out is 14.11 is still lower than the 14.62 we had in 2022. And for those that remember, AR was not exactly super accurate. So even though we're looking at completions, he missed a lot of those downfield balls, right? So it's not like we were bombing the ball left and right under AR, if we think back and remember, right? He hit a couple of them, he hit some, but he also missed a ton of them because his accuracy was so suspect, right? For whatever the reason. But at the end of the day, the thing to keep in mind there is it's not like we were just bombing the ball left and right in 2022. No, we were not. We were not. And this all comes back to things that revolve around this offense that we'll get into here in a minute. So next stat is the rushing yards per play or rushing yards per carry, however you want to look at it. In 2022, this is unfiltered raw data. So we're going to have a caveat on this number. So bear with me here. So on 2022, we were 5.51 yards per carry. And this is straight up every rush, including sacks. So I'll get to that in a minute. In 2023, we were 4.27 yards per carry, significantly less, right? Over a yard per carry less, pretty significant. And then in 2024, we bounced back to 4.55 yards per carry. However, there is a caveat, as I mentioned, and that caveat is sacks. So sack yardage in college football goes against your rushing total for both the carries and the negative yardage, both. So we went back, we found the number of sacks, we found the yardage for sacks. All this came from NCAAstat.org. And we calculated what would this number be if we took the sacks out. So in 2024, we only allowed 20 sacks. In 2023, we allowed 39, just shy of double, right? And then furthermore, in 2022, we only allowed 16 sacks. Now, why is that? Because AR is super mobile, right? He can go down a lot. He would just, break the play and run if the pocket collapsed, right? We know this. However, the facts are the facts. So the adjusted yards per carry without sack yardage in 2024 is 5.11 yards per carry. In 2023 is 5.45 yards per carry, and in 2022 is 5.92 yards per carry. So if I flip that around, it goes down from 5.92 to 5.45 to 5.11. There is a consistent depreciation in the yards per carry that we were seeing. So not only are you not as good as you were in 2022, as we saw with the yards per completion stat, But furthermore, you went down every single year when you adjusted for the sack yardage that was lost. That's significant. It's
That's an
really
indictment.
significant. It is an indictment. It's well said. It's 100%. It's an indictment. That's exactly what it is. Because even more so, Napier's offense is predicated around the run and his effectiveness and ability to run the football. And it's
Yes.
gotten worse every single year. Now, an argument could be made in relation to the O-line between 2022 and 2023. There was significant drop off in the O-line play, losing Osiris Torrance, right? Losing Garage. There was significant drop off in the play from 22 to 23. No question. However, I would absolutely argue that this year's line was better than last year's line, and yet the yards per rush still went down when it's adjusted. So there you have it. That is the breakdown, and that to me might be the biggest indictment of anything we're going through here, quite frankly, because seeing that progressive decline in the yards per rush, again, the thing that this offense is really predicated on, it's based on running the ball and vertical passing, right? That's in theory, big quotes on that. In theory, that's what it's based on, right? So that's really significant. So we've got one more stat we want to look at. I'm gonna let Randy take that, and it has to do with punting the ball versus scoring. So take it away.
Deal. Very offensive. I'm extremely offended. I wanted
So
to
am I.
before, before we moved on to punts per offensive score, which is a really cool stat that B found, but I'm going to temper that for a second, But wait, there's more. I want to go rewind a second, go back up there to 2022, 14.62 yards per carry, right? So we had AR, we had the offensive line. Arguably, was a better line than in 23 for Graham Cracker. What was the comment you made about AR not being able to hit downfield, not being able to connect as well? You remember saying that?
Just the accuracy in general, right? Whether it was downfield, whether it was short, mid-range, whatever, right?
Okay.
He only completed 53% of his passes in 2022. I'm going from memory on that stat, but it's something very close to that. So I can't swear that's the exact number, but it's in that ballpark.
And guess what? I got your backup because I wanted to look into it to see what the number was exactly. And in 2022, AR's completion percentage, 53.8%.
Hey, that's pretty close. That's pretty close for guessing off the top of my head. I'll take it.
Oh, you kidding? That's a great guess. By the way, what are the winning lottery numbers? So, I'll take that too if you have them. Conversely, you look at Graham as far as what he did, and being at somewhere around 72.873% completions, just absolutely phenomenal, right? But again, difference of that was to your point, a doubled up sacks. I mean, you go from 16 sacks to 39 sacks back down to 20 sacks. And not to mention in 23, you had 39 sacks, but sack yardage, what was it, 260 yards lost to drop that average?
Yeah, something like that.
So extremely significant. So anyways, folks, again, the progression of an offense. You have a coach that's in year one, there's going to be some hiccups, right? Year two, we're getting the kinks straightened out. Year three, we should have enough grease to be cooking and not sticking to the pan. Okay, it should be fluid. It should be in a constant momentum. And we just, again, we've had some sputtering in the cylinders. It is what it is.
More than that, it's literally the opposite of what you said we should have. Literally the opposite.
Right. And that's the thing. We know that Billy's done some great things in the program. We know about Gator May. We know about the off the field issues, which there aren't any, the extracurricular activities, things like that. The SEC honor roll, all the other countless awards. That's great. But the product on the field is just not where we need it to be.
That's right.
To be in that championship contention year in, year out. And that is why we are making these points with these stats in this type of way to solidify the quantitative analysis of why we need an OC. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Belabor the point. Next up, and again, really unique stat. Didn't even know this one existed, but this is pretty telling as well.
And it comes from, because I don't have it on the sheet here, it comes from www.teamrankings.com. So I do feel like we need to cite that. So go ahead.
Yep. Team rankings, good one. Punts per offensive score. So check this out. In 2022, We went 0.6 to 1 in 2022 for a rank of 20th in the nation. Okay.
And that means just to clarify that we had
Yeah,
0.6 punts, 0.6 punts, so less than almost a half a punt, basically just over for each offensive versus each offensive score, right? 0.06 to 1 punts to offensive score. Continue.
That's it. Yep, exactly. In 2023, a little higher, 0.8 punts to 1 offensive score. That puts us in a rank of 45th in the nation. Gator Nation. In 2024, the ratios were 1 to 1. 1 punt per offensive score, putting us in a rank of 85th in the nation.
So dropped 25 spots. Yeah, yikes is right. Dropped 25 spots, then 40 spots.
Yep.
In that rank. And this is what's so significant about this stat is the time of possession, right? The length of the game, the clock, all of that would have no bearing on this stat. That's why we pulled it and wanted to talk about it, because all those kind of caveats we gave for, okay, well, maybe this is why, and maybe that's why, and, not trying to make excuses, but just, trying to be analytical as possible and look at things that could have caused these changes. There is no rational case for this one whatsoever, other than we are getting worse offensively, period.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, B, when you look at the difference in the stats, right? I get yards per game, drop off, points per game, drop off, passing yards per game, good, bad, semi-good. The rushing yards per game, very, very telling, especially when you look at the offensive line, especially when you look at sack yardage factored in.
Yeah.
But these punts per offensive score, when you talk about moving the football and your offense humming, this is probably the biggest indictment out of all the metrics.
It really probably is. I made that state about yards per carry, but this is probably more of an indictment than that one is, to be honest. You're right.
Yeah. And here's the thing, folks. Let's go back to the last good offensive team that we had. And for those of you that remember, yes, Dan Mullen was at the helm, but it was Kyle Trask's contract year.
Kyle Trask, baby.
And our amazing tight end in Pitts, they had a phenomenal season. Obviously, the only other school in the SEC that did better was LSU and a guy named Joe Burrow, but that was what it was.
But no, that was 19. So this was 20 that we're talking about. So it's a year after Burrow. But
I apologize. Yeah, year after.
Yeah, but it's important to call out here that this team also, as good as they were, we're calling it a good offensive team. It was a great offensive passing team, but we couldn't run the ball to save our life.
No.
We could not run the ball worth a darn that season. So that's an important thing to call out before you read this stat off, right? That we were really not a good running team. We were just a great passing team. So I still think of it as being a very good offensive team overall. And certainly this stat shows that. But at the end of the day, it's important to remember that we couldn't even run the ball. Like, we couldn't even do one thing effectively. So like, we can't pass the ball now, right? But that's neither here nor there. Go ahead and read off the stat.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank goodness we had 6'6" Kyle Pitts, because he definitely did his fair share of the workload in 20. I'll just say that.
Yeah, but you're not wrong.
Right. To that end, punts per offensive score in 2020, 0.4 to 1. 0.4 punts per offensive score, ranked 4th nationally. I rest my case, Your Honor.
That's it. And that is the conclusion of the indictment.
Where's the gavel? Where's the gavel?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well said. All right. So let's have a little conversation around that. We've gone through all the stats now. Let's take a look, and I'll get this started off. And so we have multiple key statistics that have gotten worse year over year over year, whether it was every year or it ended up being worse from 22 to 24, right? In some of these, regardless, there's not a one of them that improved from 24 or from 22 back up to 24. They all ended up going down, even if there was a fluctuation in 23, regardless, which is the case of the yards per completion, right? But otherwise, everything did go down once you did the adjusted yardage for the yards per carry.
Right.
Everything went down year over year over year. The only exception was that yards per completion, and we know why that is, right? We talked about it. So why? Why did this happen? What is the reason? What is the rationale? Is it talent? Is that what caused this? Did we lose talent? Are we less talented as a team, especially on offense? No, is the answer. The 247 talent composite, so citing 247 here, of the team has actually improved year over year since last year. And since the year before it, it is better as well, though there was a little dip in between there. So we went from 14th in the talent composite in 2022 to 15th in 2023. So we did decline slightly. But now this year, as we know from if you listen to our season preview pod, we are 12th. So we have improved in talent since 2022 and versus 2023 as well, right? It wasn't a smooth progression there, but we have gotten better. So it's not talent. Talent is better, if anything, certainly this season. Play calling and design. So you know my thoughts on this if you've listened to literally any episode during the season. However, what I will say is in citing the stats, right? Let's discuss the stats and what they show us. And it goes to the passing and rushing yards per play declining overall, right? Because again, they've declined overall, even though the yards per completion went back up. But the overall yards per play in passing and rushing decreasing since Billy's first season here. So that shows you that the play calling and play design has not been beneficial to what we're doing here. But I think one point that we touch on sometimes, and we talk about it at times, but I think it's really something that we need to spend a minute talking about. And it's my final point here, and that is predictability of the offense. This is where you really see these stats start to bear out and why they would be the case. So what do I mean by that? Well, okay. In other words, in 2022, Billy's offense worked okay. It was fairly decent, right? And that's you can see that in multiple metrics that we have already discussed. And then in 23, it got worse. And then in 24, it got even worse, despite the talent once again getting better in 2024, right? So what do we take from that? What we take from that is that teams were able to figure out what Billy was doing and what he was going to do and the predictability of his offense and scheme against it very efficiently and very effectively, if I do say so myself. Some might recall a quote from the Miami defensive coordinator from the beginning of the season, where he looked at the 5 most commonly run plays and schemed against those the hardest. And sure enough, those were the plays we ran the most during the game versus Miami. Shocker. So this is where, to me, the punts per score ratio really shows up, right? As I said, teams are prepping based on what they see on film, and we know for a fact that this is working. And the punts per score versus scores ratio is what really proves that out, right? We are being stopped more frequently as a ratio versus when we are scoring the football, period. It's not debatable. It's not up for discussion. That's a fact. And that comes from the fact that he's getting more and more of the same plays on film, because even though there might be some variation or some deviations, a lot of the plays have the same basic structure and concepts. A lot of them just carry that. That's why we talk about it as being vanilla, not only because it's frankly not taking advantage of a lot of things that we could be doing with our receivers and now quarterback, but furthermore, so many of the plays are so similar to one another. They implore so many of the same concepts over and over and over again, right? Go back, watch the film if you don't believe me. You see the same stuff a lot of the time. Are there little wrinkles mixed in from time to time? Sure. Yes, they do exist. I'm not saying he calls the exact same thing every single time, but at the end of the day, a lot of it is very similar and a lot of it is very predictable. So those are my thoughts on what these stats really show and why they show what they show. What do you got in as far as that subject matter goes?
You know what, B, first of all, great arguments, great points. I really don't know that I have that much to add to it because we've seen it. We've seen the product in the field. It has not passed the eye test.
No.
At times, I thought that we can get around the play calling inefficiencies and some of the blunders. Like, for example, between the 40s and running the football. I
Yeah,
thought we can get around some of that with execution, but guess what? You can't always cover it up with even flawless execution.
that's
You
right.
just can't,
Especially
right?
especially when you're up against a team that's more talented, right? So like we can probably get around some of that stuff against Kentucky or UCF or
Sure,
FSU, right?
sure.
But you're not going to get around it against Georgia, against
Nope,
Texas, right? Against Tennessee. You're just
not
not
going to
going to
do it
do it. Not going to
at
do it.
all. Right. And to your point, the talent composite has definitely improved 100%. And we've seen it on the field on a 3rd and 8, on a 3rd and 6, on a 3rd and 11. Like, what are we doing? Not to mention on different times that we've seen earlier in the season, going for it, getting cute on the edge with a jet sweep on a 4th and 1 and a 4th and 2 when you've got almost a 240-pound quarterback that you can just put under center and reach a yard. Play
Yep.
calling, we know a good signal caller is not just calling a great game from a play standpoint, but it's the rhythm and the selection and the timing of when the play is called. I want to say the quote from Shannon Dawson. I can't really quote it because I can't find it, but I want to say in his post-game interview, they guessed right on 6 or 7 out of their first 10 plays. What? What?
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
I'm just, and he's up there with this smirk on his face and shaking his head. Oh, a smug
That
look on his face.
as he should be. I mean, as he should be. You
Yeah,
know, the hats off to him because he did exactly what he should have done in their game
sure.
prep. And Miami handed us our butts the way they did because of the game prep that they had, really on both sides of the ball, but especially defensively. I felt like that was really a thing. And what's funny? Well, here's what's funny. This is worth calling out. What does Miami's defense look like since they played us, or especially in the back half of the season? The answer
Oh.
is a dumpster fire. They were terrible. They were absolutely terrible on defense in the back half of the year. Multiple games where they're allowing 40 points a game. Multiple games. They were awful. But you're telling me that group that was basically the same talent level that we were
Yeah.
was magically way better than us? I don't think
Mhm.
so. No, not today, because they couldn't play worth a darn against multiple different teams. Multiple different teams. Whether they won or lost the game, their
Yeah.
defense was bad. And yet they held us to 17 points and made us look super pedestrian.
Absolutely abysmal. Exactly. Exactly. And that's a tough thing too. The other thing about this team or this offense or lack thereof is the 2-minute drill or lack thereof. Okay, outside
Don't
push.
get me started.
I know, but I'm just going to mention it because that was part of some of our
Now,
analysis
yeah, no,
in some
it's
of the
worth
game
mentioning.
breakdowns,
It's worth
right?
mentioning without question.
So you've got the opportunity to push the ball down the field, and especially on a lot of those plays when we know it's 3rd and 12, we know it's 3rd and 13, and we had a decent enough offensive line to do it. We could have gone max protect, but instead, all we do is a draw play. We run the football, we toss the football, and try and get medial yardage to put it in 4th and 4, 4th and 5 to have Jeremy Crawshaw go up there and boot it a mile. Okay, that's it. And the last thing I'll say as far as predictability, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go way back, as 112 would say, but I'm going to go back and talk about what happened with Napier at Clemson. B, I know you know this, but
Yes. Valid point, though.
yeah, I think a key point is when Napier was an offensive mind. I know I say that loosely, but the offensive coordinator at Clemson under Dabo before he went to Alabama, right? Napier was actually fired for Clemson from the signal caller because of what main concept? B, what was it?
Well, I think you're talking about the passing. I'm not sure what the question you're asking is. What concept in general, or like the passing concepts, or what are we referring to?
The
Sorry, I'm not
main
sure. I'm getting the question.
My apologies. I threw you a curve. But
You
at the end
did.
of the day, the main reason for his termination was the predictability, that P word of
Oh,
his offense.
yes, absolutely, without question. Sorry, I thought you were talking about a certain play call or set of
Okay,
plays or
okay.
something. I
Gotcha.
didn't realize you were just talking overall. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I believe it was even cited as
Yes.
a reason why he was let go. And I'm speaking from memory there, I don't have a source,
It was
but
a Sports Illustrated article. Yes, sir.
awesome. There you go. So yes, he was cited as being let go because of his predictability, as well as the lack of effectiveness, of course, but the predictability being the primary contributor. So that's a great final thought, and that's really good. And the only thing else I want to say is we have talked about since Lagway took over as the starter, how he was able to come out initially and really put some stuff on film that was eye popping, right? Magic, as you like to refer to me talking about, right?
Yeah.
But what has happened is that teams have figured out what he's doing, what he wants to do, meaning Lagway, not Napier, and they've taken it away. And
They
as
have.
soon as and very easily and very effectively by either playing cover 4, dropping 8, right? Even playing some cover 3 with drop 8 has taken it away because we do not have the downfield concepts to work together or even maybe work at all because we're running one guy deep consistently to be able to get him the opportunity to throw that deep ball that he does so well. And that is criminal. You are literally taking your player's best attribute away by calling plays that do not contribute to his abilities and ability, therefore, to be successful. And that is an absolute indictment for me when you really break it all down. Maybe the biggest indictment, honestly, even though I know we've said that a couple of times. That to me is just such an indictment of what you're doing as a play caller. You are literally calling the same plays for DJ Lagway that you were for Graham Mertz. That's insane.
Mm.
That is the definition, right? Because it's repeating the same behavior and expecting different results.
Wow.
And that's not actually the definition of insanity, by the way. It gets said a lot, but in fairness, that's not actually what's in the dictionary. However, we will use that definition for this purpose. So
we can, and it applies very, very well. B, I'm going to bring up a closing, one of my closing points here. Isn't it ironic that the best deep passer in college football is a true freshman?
yeah.
Isn't it ironic that the number 2 best deep passer in college football, was also a freshman? Whom was that, if you remember, B?
I'm going to have to remember his name, and I can't off the top of my head. It's the Charlotte quarterback that transferred to Florida. I can't remember his name. I
Sean
apologize.
Purdy. Folks,
thank you very much.
We have the number
not to
one.
be confused with Brock Purdy, by the way.
No. We have the number 1 and number 2 ranked deep passers in college football. They're both freshmen, and their offensive coordinator has limitations of how to use them in his offense. I rest my case, Your Honor.
Without question. Great point. And it's awesome that we have them for the record. However,
yes, of course.
However, we need to find better ways to use them. And that's the point of this and why it's so critical that we hire an offensive coordinator. Again, as we have discussed previously, I'm not convinced that happens. I still hope it does, but I'm hearing some buzz and some rumors now, more than rumors really, about a defensive coordinator being hired to fill Austin Armstrong's spot, which means there is almost no chance that we actually do if that in fact happens. So let's hope we don't. Because that would be, I don't care who it is, even if it is the rumored name, which I won't get into. But but even if it is the rumored name, that is very high profile and would be great for the defense. It would be great for the defense. Our defense could really take yet another step in the right direction. I think it would be awesome in that regard. However, we are still going to be severely limited on offense and doing ourselves a complete disservice if we do not hire an OC. And again, the stats bear it out. That isn't just our opinion. It is our opinion, but it's also, frankly, fact. So there you have it. All right. With that, I think we are wrapping things up here right around the 5-minute mark, which is pretty good. That's pretty much what we went for. So, hey, we did it. Yay for us.
Awesome.
So we'll wrap things up and sign off here. Want to let you know our next pod will be on January 21st. So again, in another 2 weeks, we are going to do another kind of shorter pod. We are going to do an analytical review of the defense under Napier. The point of this being that we want to look at both sides of the ball. While we do not necessarily think we need to make a case for a DC being hired, as I just mentioned, we do want to look at it. We wanted to make sure that we, kind of took in both sides of this and, look at the arguments on either side of the ball. And so we will be doing that for our next pod on January 21st. So with that, thank you as always for taking the time to give us a listen. And we as always have really enjoyed bringing it to you, and just hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we've enjoyed putting out the broadcast. So with that, I will turn it over to you. If you got any closing thoughts before you sign us off there, Randy.
That's it, my man. Hey, really good to dive into this offensive, quote unquote, review under Napier.
Yes,
and again, we've been to the swamp, we've been to the games, we've talked to people, we know the grumblings. And again, these are opinions, but again, hopefully, Gator Nation, we've provided you with some factual analysis, some stats, some numbers to back up why we can more than confidently make the case why we need an offensive coordinator. And I tell you what, this was fun to dive into, because a lot of eye-opening things. Like for me, I think the biggest one was probably the stat regarding punts per offensive score. That was probably the nail in that coffin for me.
Yeah.
But anyways, had fun doing it, B, as always. And I'll tell you what, folks, wherever you are, whenever you may be listening, thanks for taking the time, and we will see you around, Gator Nation.